We all need gis, rash guards, and a bunch of gear to train Jiu Jitsu. Here at RŌL Academy, we've been using Fuji Sports for a very, very long time, but more importantly, they've been sponsoring the RŌL Radio podcast for over a year at this point. Gary?
Yeah, I'm checking out the website right now. Anything you could possibly need, but the new stuff, this American Grappler stuff, is amazing. It's so slick looking. Rash guard shorts, really cool, giant eagle on it. It is nice. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, they've got the Be a Menace Happy Nogi lineup. So as you're getting choked out, you're looking up at the nice smiley face emoji. Anything you could possibly need, you can find at fujisports.com.
You have questions, I have answers. I started a brand new podcast just recently that's available on all podcast platforms and YouTube. It's called Ask a Black Belt. Very simple. You drop me questions, I answer them. Very simple, 5-6 minutes. Gary, have you heard it?
I have heard it, and I really appreciate it. How do those questions get to you?
Well, listen, you can message me on Instagram. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. But you can also comment on any post that I make, and I try to genuinely answer the questions as fast as I can, and they get posted 3 times a week as it is right now.
Beautiful. Ask a Black Belt. Check it out on your favorite podcast platform. What's up, everyone? If you are a regular listener, you already know the deal. Please remember to hit the like, share, download, listen, subscribe, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you listen. That ensures that we can continue bringing you the great guests and amazing content you have come to expect. Today's guest, Felicia Oh, has the distinction of being one of the first women outside of Brazil to receive a black belt, which she received from the legend Jacques Machado. Felicia is also a World's Masters champion, Pan American Gi and No Gi champion, and U.S. Open champion. Listen as Felicia opens up about her unusual introduction to Jiu Jitsu, overcoming major setbacks, illnesses, and injuries, and why you need to embrace the grinding nature and struggle of Jiu Jitsu in order to be in it for the long haul. Here's the RŌL Radio with artist, martial artist, instructor, teacher, and the 6th female to receive a black belt outside of Brazil, Felicia Oh.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we're live. Gary, how are you, sir?
I'm good. I've got my glasses today. I don't know if anybody listened to the last episode. I didn't have my glasses. I couldn't take notes. I couldn't read anything.
Does that mean you're going to be pressing the right buttons this time?
The red one is lit up. Everything is where it needs to be, so I think we'll be okay.
Okay, well, sounds good.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you hear that there was quite a bit of controversy in regards to my question, Ask Black Belt question?
Yeah. Well, we should ask our guest today, too, about this. Do you turn your back when you tie your belt to your black belt?
Yeah, so first of all, Felicia, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. We'll jump right into this. You know, I have another podcast, very small one actually, but I answer questions that students all around everywhere kind of ask in general. And one of the questions that arose was, do you turn away from the instructor when you tie the belt? You know, some academies do it in a very old school way. And I posted kind of, it wasn't even an answer, but I posted essentially kind of different perspectives and where this is sourcing. And there was a lot of people who didn't like it. I was quite surprised, actually. So I'm curious what you think. Is that considered old school?
What didn't they like? They didn't like the question, or they didn't like the answers?
You know what? It's hard to tell. There was a lot of, there were some people who said, yeah, we do this in my academy. We turn away from the instructor as a sign of respect. And there was few of those, but a lot of them were like, are we in 21st century? What is this? Who are we really talking about? Is this really serious? I don't know. And I know typically people are more negative when they express their opinions, but it was quite surprising. I don't know.
What the history of that, I think, I don't know if I'm correct, but my understanding is like the history is from more like judo and other martial arts, where you turn away and it's more of a, not so much respect to someone, but it's like a modesty thing.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Like I don't know.
It's like similarly like bowing into the mat or bowing into the photos of the founders of Jiu Jitsu. It's one of those.
It's just a tradition.
Unwritten tradition. Yeah, right. I think so, right?
I haven't noticed any of my instructors do that.
Yeah, we don't do it here.
We don't do it here either.
I don't do it.
But it, I know some do. I know some do. Anyhow, we get. I get all flustered about this. But
He's
anyway.
upset because everybody didn't see the same thing the same way he did. He gets very flustered. You can see it right now.
It is what it is. It is what it is.
Well, I think it's funny, when I came into jiu-jitsu, I wasn't like I'm jumping ahead of you guys. I wasn't the first generation coming in, but I've noticed in more recent days, like some people will say things like they will refer to jiu-jitsu traditions. And, I'm a student of Jacques Machado's, who is pretty much the source, the spigot, fucking pure water and stuff. Like he grew up in the family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at his academy, there a lot of those traditions of jiu-jitsu that newer people talk about. It's like that doesn't exist,
Yeah.
So it's like they're almost projecting it on from other martial arts, or they come in and because their academy does it, they think that's the tradition of jiu-jitsu. And I'm not knocking it. You can do whatever you want, but
right.
It's like, well, I think I'm more connected to the,
Do you think that's part of the evolution of jiu-jitsu that's been taking place over the last few decades? I mean, it's just like the techniques and the concepts and jiu-jitsu itself evolves on the mat. Some of those traditions, quote unquote, continue evolving. I mean, a decade or 2 decades ago, nobody thought about having Nogi academies, purely Nogi, rewarding belts, and there are some, and again, I'm not criticizing them, but that didn't exist 2 decades ago. It didn't, right? Do you think that's part of the evolution of jiu-jitsu and kind of that freedom, especially in this country where people adopt different things and continue growing it?
Absolutely. And I have no problem with that. My comment was just that people will say, oh, this is the tradition. It's like, no, it's not, like, I'm not saying that it shouldn't evolve at all. Absolutely. It should evolve. And I came up through the whole gi no gi thing. I mean, I was kind of in the center of all that with Eddie Bravo,
Absolutely.
like it was this major thing and heresy and all this craziness, now it's like, no big deal. Now we have tons of no-gi guys that don't do gi and vice versa, and people that do both, like always,
Yeah, no, and absolutely. How did this all start for you? You have such an interesting story, and it's some up and downs, but it creates a very interesting path, if you will.
Yeah, I had actually no interest in martial arts, fighting, or anything of that sort. Although I did grow up in Seattle. So the most famous, historically most famous martial artist was buried a couple blocks from my high school, Bruce Lee. So I grew up aware of that, but I never did any martial arts. My dad did Aikido and I didn't. And I remember around 95 or whatever on the news, I heard about this crazy thing where people were locked in a cage and fighting to the death. And I was like, that's crazy. Who would do that? That's insane. Little did I know that a few years later, it would be this major part of my life. I was living in LA. I had gone through graduate school, went to art school, graduate school in art, and was working in Hollywood and graphics. And I was rock climbing and became friends with some people rock climbing. And I ended up doing the LA Marathon, which was a nightmare that year. And then later that year, I went on a hiking trip up to Mount Whitney with one of the women that I rock climbed with. And her husband was telling me about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And it was, technique over size and strength. And I had no interest in martial arts, no interest in anything he was talking about. And we went up and we get up to the little motel and he starts showing me the positions on the bed. And I think it's a little weird. And I don't really know him. I mean, I think I might've met him once before and we're on this trip and she's just laughing and not jumping in. And he's showing me the mount and the guard on the bed. And I'm kind of a little awkward, but then, it doesn't really go beyond that. And then I was like, okay. And then we go on the hiking trip and it becomes a nightmare. Snow came in and this was in the end of October 2000. And it was the last weekend that they allowed people up there. And of course, that was why, because storms come in, and we got one of those. And then we thought we were going to die. And so as we were driving off the mountain, I was like thinking about how the year hadn't gone so well with all this outdoor activity, because when I did the marathon, it also was like lightning, thundering, and raining, and all the drains in LA, like they back up back in the day, and you were running through like a foot of water of rain. So I was like, maybe I need to go indoors. And what was that thing you were talking about? And let me come check that out. And then we came back the next week. I went and checked out the class. The next day I signed up and started training.
Was that at Jean-Jacques?
Yeah.
It was
Right off the bat.
Well,
Nice.
so obviously you are not familiar at that point of time. You're not familiar with jiu-jitsu. You have this one experience in the hotel room, whatever that is, right? and you kind of breaching into this completely unknown, walking into that academy. What are your expectations?
I don't think I really had any. I'm pretty. I think I just kind of, okay, let's go see what this is. And I trusted my friend's husband, right? And I was like, okay, that looks interesting. I think there are a lot of things that I've done in my life where I didn't, like, I'm very cautious about certain things, and I'm not reckless in my life, I don't think. But I also don't think too far in advance on certain things. Like I remember filling out the application form when I came in, you fill out everything and it's like, do you want to get a black belt? And I'm like, well, of course. Like, isn't that the point of doing martial arts? Like everybody else, I had no idea.
How long does it take? Is it a month or two? Right? I mean, that didn't even cross my mind. I was just like, yes. And then I just started coming. So I never thought about where it was going or leading to, or it was just something I started doing. And then I would just go twice a week. And I know I've had this conversation with a lot of people that start jiu-jitsu, like they go home after work, they sit down and then they never get back up, or they don't go because they don't feel like it. To me, I signed up, I paid for it. So I figured out which days I wanted to go in my schedule. And then to me, it was a class that, if I'm paying for it, I'm going to go. Why would I not? And I never went because I didn't feel like it. I just took it like any other class I would take, not a gym membership where you just randomly went. It was like school. So it was just part of my schedule. And I always tell people now, like, if you have to go to your job or whatever, don't go home. Because once you sit down and after you go home, you're not going to get up. So keep all your stuff in your car, bring a snack, whatever you need, and do emails, play games. We all sit on our phones. So just go to the parking lot, sit there outside the academy for an hour, whatever time you have your snack, and then just go and train. And, to me, it was just never, do I feel like going? It's more like, it's part of the routine.
I'm going to class. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. You mentioned in this, and we talk about this very frequently, right? There's always a reason not to train.
Yeah. Right?
There's always a reason. You can find millions of them every single day, and overcoming some of these mental blocks, if you will, obstacles to get to the training. Sometimes it's hard for some individuals, even though the moment they get in the door, the moment they step onto the mat, is like a different world opens up. Mm-hmm. Smiles, friends, you get stimulated physically, mentally, a whole 9 yards. Getting to the academy is so hard. Why do you think that's happening? Why do you think it's so hard to get to that freaking door?
I don't know. I didn't have that issue. I was always excited to go. That doesn't mean I didn't have anxiety. I had anxiety like everybody else, mm-hmm. but I don't think I let that get very loud in my head. I had more anxiety once class started and they were teaching a technique and I was like, who am I going to work with? And then I would try to find a friendly person that I knew that I'd worked with before. And then I would kind of scoot closer to that person. So then when I would be right next to that person.
Was that because of the size or gender? Why was there concern there for you?
I think you could probably say size, gender, all those things, but I think I was just I am just a neurotic person.
Mhm.
And I think just being new, I mean, I didn't, I think I was more aware of size. And then I also, probably gender. I mean, I definitely am attuned, I think, having worked in male dominated environments for most of my life. You can sense who's more open and who's less open to you. And I have friends now that I don't train with, that I'm great friends with for years, but I still don't roll with them because for whatever reason, like they don't find anything useful. They don't know how to just move and work technique. That's fine. I mean, I respect what they come to the sport for and what they come into that room for. And we're great friends and we catch up and that's fine. I just don't roll with them. And I respect that, so everyone has to find their own way. There are definitely people that I maybe rolled with in the past that were not so open to it, but over time have changed and become great training partners. Right. And that's the long game and the beauty that I find in it, where you can help people to be good partners, like the journey they go on from being a white belt to even just a blue belt or a purple belt, it's like, they can't help but be a white belt, because that is what they are. They can't help but be a spaz, and even with like, they start becoming aware of it. And then sometimes, you'll see them, they get to blue belt and they're dealing with a new white belt and they go, oh my gosh, is that what I was like? Like
Yes, that's exactly what you were like.
but I also like equate it to life, like when you're born, you don't know how to go use a toilet. I mean, it's like when you're 6 months old, no one's expecting you to go drive yourself to work. You have to be what you are at that time and live the experience. And that experience is what helps you grow. So you can't fault someone for being like a spazzy white belt. That's just what they are. Babies cry and they need to be taken care of. You don't go, you couldn't take care of yourself when you were 6 months old and go out and earn a living. Like, what is wrong with you? I resent you for that. It's like, oh yeah, I expected more from you. So many times, it's like, I do equate it, like blue belts, maybe you're a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, and purple belts, maybe you're a 10-year-old, brown belts, maybe you're 17, 18, and black belts, maybe you're like an adult. And then a 21-year-old adult is different than a 45-year adult or a 60-year adult, right? So there's, as they say, levels to that, right? And you can't expect people to be more than they are until they have the experience and then they learn. But what's cool is that you can be part of that influence on that journey for other people, and you can mold them and help them to show them a way that they might not have found by themselves.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is it our responsibility, people who've been around for a little while, to point those things out to them? Or is it their responsibility to figure it out on their own? Is it both of us? Is it ever, you know what I mean? Are we supposed to come together to help them through that?
I found that it naturally kind of happens on both sides. I find that as people rise up in the ranks, they want to help the other people, right? It's something, and you'll see blue belts. I mean, almost to the point of where it's crazy. You like a guy that just got his blue belt and he's like trying to teach everybody. It's like something about jiu-jitsu it makes you want to share because you've discovered the secret. Every day you go in, you've discovered something. You're a blue belt and you're like, I figured it out. Like, I had to share the world and I want to share with these people. So I think it just comes with the process. I don't know. And that in turn helps those other people come up, right?
Yeah, and
I think
go ahead.
As people are coming up, I think they, again, it's just like people like they start becoming self-aware, generally speaking. Like there's a few that don't, but they start, as they're going through the belts, like they start becoming self-aware. And so whether that's as a blue belt going, oh my gosh, was I a spazzy white belt? Or like as a purple, brown, or even black belt, like wanting to teach and help bring those other people up, like you become aware of your responsibility or your place in your academy, whether that's following or leading or helping keep things in balance.
And there's the other factor of really making a progression with the skill too. I mean, as we go through these white, blue, purple stages, we discover fairly quickly that being physical and smashing people, even though might bring this instant satisfaction, is very ineffective in a sense, where people can. How many times we find ourselves in a position when we train with somebody who's half of our size and they manipulate us like we are ragdoll. I mean, that's very eye-opening and very humbling experience, right? And everybody at some point goes through that. And then we are on the other side of that experience when somebody else is smashing us, and we are able to actually manipulate that situation to our advantage. And it's this long journey of experiences.
I think it goes back to what you were saying about the evolution of the sport, in that where we are now, it's an environment where people twice my size, men twice my size, have no issue asking me, I need help. Can you help me with this problem? Or I'm getting stuck here. Or what do you do? Where I think in the past, maybe 20 years ago, like they wouldn't come to me. They wouldn't go to a small female and ask a technical question.
Well, yeah, because how would you know? Right? I'm just saying, quotes.
No, even if I was a black belt, I said, just the environment is very different now.
Right.
Where now, like, people understand. And so, like 6'5" brown belts or purple belts or whatever will come to me and say, like, how do I do this? Or they'll roll with me, and they understand how to roll with me now, And well, I think in the past that might not have happened so readily. Well,
do you think that's part of that evolution that we talked about? Because 20 years ago, there was not many female black belts. Probably we could count them on our fingers, right? That's probably around the world. There was not that many of them, let alone in this country. Today, it's jiu-jitsu is more accessible. Any major, probably any decent city, there is at least one academy, right? Plus, there is by far more females. Plus, that we have more variety of black belt skill sets. Everything is accessible on our phones. We can have amazing conversations like this one. So there's many avenues to stimulate our minds from a jiu-jitsu perspective. I'm not only talking about the technique itself, right? The topic of conversation just evolves and continues. It gives us the access to continue kind of growing this, right? Am I on the right track?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it just keeps opening up more and more. So it's not like I have to find the biggest, toughest black belt to ask this question of,
right. Yeah, I think it's also changed that way. We've evolved a little bit, and hopefully in our regular society too, where I think that evolution hopefully has pushed the evolution of jiu-jitsu as well, so that people aren't, I would say a 6'5" male isn't intimidated to go ask a 5'2" female for advice or help or, a technical question. I think we've evolved, hopefully, inside and outside the academy.
Do you have a lot of students who are twice your size asking you for opinion? Technical?
I have a group of my little cadre that will sneak over and ask me questions, toward the end of class. I don't teach. I teach privates and seminars, but I am a student at John Jacques. But, it's like after you spend time, you guys know, after you spend time on the mat with people and then you roll with them and then they're like, wait, like, how are you doing that? Like, the only way I can do anything to you is if I completely smash you and use my strength on you. And doing that when they need to is fine. But everyone's always helping everyone else. I think that for me, that it's always kind of been that way. Even when at the beginning, you didn't necessarily have Jean-Jacques or maybe a black belt helping you, but it's like that trickle down of information where everyone else in the academy, and granted, there was a lot less social media and resources. So more of the information was coming from the academy, but I feel like everything that I've learned or all that information came from Jean-Jacques, but especially earlier on, a lot of that came through other people from him.
We talked quite a bit so far about these differences in size and gender and so on. Do you think that even though all this is very accessible, do you think that there is still hesitance to train between the genders, between male and female. Do you see that frequently around the academies around the world?
Well, I don't. I mean, I pretty much train at Jean-Jacques most of the time, and so I haven't. I mean, I'm planning to hopefully go train around a little bit more. I think in the past, for me, I've been hesitant to go to other places as I was coming up. Sometimes I had the experience of going to an academy and everyone was huge, and this was, years ago. And I didn't feel that safe, because I wasn't maybe a black belt, or I was after I was a black belt, but there wasn't as much information and growth in the sport. And so going to random academies was not always something I felt comfortable with. I think the way the world is now, it's way more comfortable. There's way more women. There's way more appreciation of women and understanding of training. It's not just women. It's like people of all ages, it's like the whole, sorry to plug it, RŌL Forever, where everybody, there's space for everybody to be on that mat. And it may not be at every academy. And so it's like finding the right place to go where there is space for you to roll and respect and gratitude for that. Right. And that exists in everywhere now in a much broader way than it used to. So I do hope, as our world opens back up, I do hope to travel and visit a lot more places.
So let me spin that question slightly differently.
Okay.
Based on your experience, 20 years on the mat, what would you say to a female who wants to try jiu-jitsu, who wants to get on the mat, but she has concerns about size, number one? I mean, that's the obvious one, but also the gender differences that we have to step into. Well, male-dominated sport. Let's just say what it is. The odds, the percentage split between male and female on the mat averages, I don't know, 1 to 20 probably in the average academy, right? So what are your thoughts? How do they do research? How are they smart about this? How do they select? Should they even do it?
So I would say it's not specific to women. I would say anybody who was going to go into the sport of jiu-jitsu, they do the research. They go visit as many academies as they can that are near them, that are feasible. And I think the key is to find the right fit for you, regardless, whether maybe you're a 50-year-old man, maybe you're a 20-year-old guy who just finished up, a wrestling career. You have to find the appropriate fit for you. So that 20-year-old doesn't probably want to go to the family academy down the street. He probably wants to go to the competitive academy down the street, the other direction. Right. So I think it's really about finding the right fit for you. If you have concerns about your size or your gender, then look and find the places that are open to that may have a women's program, if that makes you feel more comfortable, or that may have a different intro class for you, or whatever it is. I feel that there's so much to be gained from this, but I mean, obviously I'm biased to jiu-jitsu, right? like I think it's changed. It has completely changed my life, right? Like my life today is completely nothing I would have ever imagined.
But I think what's really important about your story is that you didn't have interest to go to the jiu-jitsu academy. It was complete. I mean, as I'm listening to you, as the research we've done, it was a set of accidents really that led you onto the mat, and I think that is the key, because there's many females out there who want to try it, but they are hesitant. So there is the willingness to actually make that first step, right? In your case, it was like, well, okay, it was snowing, we were stuck, whatever, all these things happen. This guy showed me things on the bed, whatever, and then, I'll trust him because he's friend of mine, and I'm gonna lead and see what happens. And I did ask you, what are your expectations? And you said yourself, I had none. I was just kind of going with it. Right. So that's a very different approach. Your life changed because of the circumstances you were around. But I'm more curious even about the women who want to do it, but they are hesitant. And that is what was interesting about your answer, that you do research. And I say this all the time, even people who come to my academy, who are trying classes or trying to figure this out, we always say, go and see other places. Like, we do jiu-jitsu here, but I don't claim to be the best, and I don't claim that our academy will fit you the best. It's a two-way street. As I am interviewing you as a student, you should be even interviewing us as an academy, as an instructor, as a
or
staff.
even the community,
or even community,
or culture is what I meant, not community, but the culture that's at your academy. Yeah.
Yeah, that is exactly, you completely just hit it right, because no one's going to be happy if it's a bad fit, right? If you go to an academy and it's not your tribe, and then you're going to be wanting it to be something. It's like in a relationship, you want it to be something else. They want it to be you to be something else, and no one's happy. It's like you're with the wrong person. Then you need to break up and go find the right person, right? Yeah. And find the place where you feel comfortable, where you feel your tribe, whether that's age, size, attitude, whatever it is. I think there's enough information out there, to research and to go have those experiences, like see what it's like, see what the people are like, talk to the people there. Do you feel comfortable with those people? No? Okay, maybe try another place.
Yeah. And life is good. I mean, as long as we continue exploring.
Like, why stay in a bad relationship if it's not working for either of you?
Well said. I agree. But listen, many do. Many stay in a bad relationships. Many stay at the academies that don't work for them.
Many abused men and women, and many people stay in bad relationships.
Yeah, for sure. When did you think when did you fall in love with it? When did it change from something I'm going to try, something that I'm interested in, to this is for me? This isn't right. It's not the marathon. It's not the rock climbing. It's not the gymnastics anymore. It's jiu-jitsu, 100%.
Oh, it's just so weird because it just slowly takes over. Yeah. And there was never a point where I was like, this is it, It was just so gradual. And then I just started adjusting my life around jiu-jitsu, whether that was, I remember sitting one day in the parking lot before class, and, it took me a long time to become a Lakers fan because I grew up in Seattle, right?
Sure.
And then I started watching all the Lakers games. And then I was like recording them on TiVo at the time. And I remember sitting there and I had so many games backed up on my TiVo, right? And then I started only watching the last 2 minutes and then realizing, you know what, like part of the beauty of basketball is watching the drama unfold over the 4 quarters of the game, right? And I'm missing that by just watching the last 2 minutes. And then I had to make the decision. I sat there and I thought, I have to give up watching basketball. If I'm going to do jiu-jitsu, I got to give up basketball. So I was like, okay. So I did, I just stopped watching basketball. And like I said, like, it was just so gradual. It was just a piece at a time that kept, so there was never this one grand moment. It was just like, oh, okay. And then, when I work as a freelancer, it was like, okay, these days I'm working and then I go back to train. And these days I'm working, I go back to train. How do I adjust my schedule around here? Oh, now I'm going to start teaching college. And then, okay, if I schedule my classes these days, I can train these days. And then slowly now I'm advising instead of teaching as much. I can stack all these. And that is near R1 and I can go train wrestling over there on that same day, but that's over the course of like 5 or 6 years, right? Like that it's your glacier. Life just starts adjusting itself. And then I won the North American trials in 2006 for Abu Dhabi. And I was teaching at the time. And I remember winter break happens. And I realized I need to quit my teaching job so I can just focus for the next couple months to get ready for ADCC. And that was when I left teaching. graphics in college. So that was kind of more of a definitive step right there. But that was like getting ready for ADCC, right? So it was pretty far down.
But what was interesting here is essentially you're saying the moment we start molding the life around jiu-jitsu, we should consider that we are hooked. Like, it's just happened.
Yeah, for you people, the people who haven't made that transition.
But
yet.
here's a funny, interesting story. Is the other day we had a visitor coming to the academy, and one of the first things he says, he was like, "I just want to see part of the class, and I have to leave in about 10, 15 minutes." He said, and then class goes on, and I'm teaching, and he's still there 15 minutes later. I'm looking, okay, we chit chat here and there, the full class passes by, he's still sitting there. I was like, I thought you were leaving in 15 minutes. I was like, I can't. I'm just hooked. This is crazy.
Right off the bat. He's like, maybe I should call my Uber now.
It was fun. It's funny. It's very refreshing to see that it's so stimulating. And he wasn't even on the mat. He was just sitting off the mat watching the class. So it's just mind blowing to me that that level of engagement can really take place without you being hands-on. This is just watching and stimulating yourself.
Yeah, I think there's also, not to be a downer, but there's the other side where sometimes people come to the sport really gung-ho and actually really talented. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think this happens with anything in life. And once it starts getting harder, and once it becomes the struggle and the pain, sometimes it's hard for them to stay with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everyone sees the story, like a guy comes in and brings his buddy. The guy that's all excited to come in is the one that quits, and the buddy who didn't want to come and that was just going to help him. And, like, okay, I'll go with you. They're the ones that end up staying and becoming the black belt 10 years later. Right. I think the interesting of jiu-jitsu, it's like, it's pretty much based on failure, right? Like, it's based on adversity and failure, and it's painful and it's difficult and it's a struggle. It's a constant struggle. And if you're not okay and comfortable with that, then it's hard to stay.
But that's also, I want to flip this the other side. That's also the beauty of this. Right? Yes. I mean, we do struggle all the time. We constantly troubleshoot, constantly solve problems. We were talking to Kenny Florian this week, and one of the things, I asked is this more physically or mentally stimulating? And I don't know. It's hard to answer that one because it is very mind stimulating. Like, we have to think constantly. And some people, you're right, some people find struggle challenging and they take breaks and they quit. But others, I think that's a motivator point too.
Yeah. And I think that was my point. It's like, if you're not going to, as they say, embrace the grind, embrace the suck, and constantly feel that struggle, well, for a while, for a long while, constantly for a long while, that is difficult for you to hang in there, right? And I think that is what a lot of people find is the hook, right? That's the heroin of it, right? That it is something we're chasing in that same way. It's very elusive and difficult. And sometimes you have these breakthroughs and you have these moments, and then right away they're gone. You're like, I got it. Oh my gosh. Like, I understand it. And then the next day you go to class and you get your ass smashed. And then you're like, oh man. Like, and then you're back at the bottom again and you're like, oh no. And if your makeup, your psychology, your mindset, your personality, if you can't maintain through that and struggle through that and feel the beauty of that struggle, then it's hard to stay in the sport.
Yeah. Do you think it's also maybe people have lofty expectations, or it's like you said, you think you have that breakthrough and now I'm going to be this other thing, right? And then you get smashed, where you should be more of, I didn't get smashed as much today. I got tapped a little less. I did better against Mike, who usually taps me out 6 times. You know, I made it 4 today, or now a 7-minute round is easier than I thought it was. If you lower those expectations, I think that struggle is even less, where it's like you can see yourself making those steps rather than giant leaps, I guess, is the way I'm looking at it. And if people come into it with that attitude, maybe that struggle's not so hard.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think part of it too is just showing up and being there, and it's not so it's not always so goal oriented and checklisting, you know, or else it would be, then I should be able to do these moves and get my black belt. I think it literally, by the time you get your black belt, it's something that just goes, part of that has just absorbed into your body, into your cells, into your psyche, you know? And it's just a matter of showing up every day. And every day, like if you get smashed every day, you're still learning. Even though you don't know what you're learning, your body is learning, something's happening. And it's not always what's the word where it's not like you know what's going on. Like I tell people, I felt like, yeah, you're not consciously learning. You don't go, oh, I learned this today. It's like, no, I just got my ass kicked today. And in that, there's stuff going on that you aren't aware of. There's stuff in your, I don't know, that it changes who you are. It changes your understanding. And so at a very simple level, like when I tell people, like when they're coming in and they're trying to understand a move that a teacher's teaching, and it's like, dude, you're not going to understand it. And this is already the 3rd version or whatever. Just do it like Twister. Don't try to understand it here. Right foot here, left foot here. Do this left foot, you just repeat it. You're not going to understand it. Your body's not going to make sense of it. People expect their body to make sense of everything that they try. Not when you start, you know, like that's why they call it training. You have to keep training and training and training. And, you know, the first time you learn a move, you just do that. It makes no sense. It doesn't make sense. My body, it's awkward. 6 months later, the teacher teaches it again. You forgot that you've learned this move once before, but somehow it feels pretty, like that feels really good to me. That feels comfortable. It's like, yeah, because you've already done it before, even though you don't remember it. Right. So it's like this idea that you have to understand everything before you understand and can do everything doesn't happen. It just keeps building. So that's why, like after 20 years, I can still learn details on a armbar, little things here and there, little things of things that I already know. You're always finding new things, which is what is the beauty of it, right? Like after how many years, it's like it's still evolving and changing, and there's always discovery and learning. It's like, oh man, look what this new thing my body did. Like I didn't even think about it. My body just did it. That was fucking cool. Oops, sorry. And sometimes you're like, what was that? You know, you ask your partner, you're like, that was really cool. What did I just do? Because your body has absorbed things. You never even thought about it, but your body knows these things. And those are the things that it's learning when you're not aware that you're learning. Does that make sense? Is that weird?
No, absolutely. I remember, this is when I was a white belt. I remember, you know, one of my coaches, one of my instructors always kept telling me, just show up. That was his answer to everything. And I was one of those annoying students who asked a million questions.
Thank God there was no Instagram back
There was
then.
always questioning. I was like, literally, I was like, but what if? But what if? What about this? Always. Okay, I was really annoying. And he always told me, just show up. Just show up. And I was really frustrated about this. This went on for months. Just show up. Who cares? Just show up. Just show up. And I completely forgot about this until now. But the one other time that this really came to my mind, it was a decade later. I'm a black belt, and one of my students now literally does the same thing. And my answer is, just show up. And then it hit me like a brick in my head. Oh, I was that guy. Oh, yes. Just show up. Just show up. Things get easier. Just show up. Just do it. Anyway, that's my story.
That's awesome. I definitely think, you know, like as you progress, then you can start targeting things and becoming conscious of things. But yeah, for a long time, it is just show up, and your body the learning happened.
You adapt. Listen, I want to pivot this into a little bit of your competition. You train. I listened to another interview with you, and you train, twice a week. You mentioned it yourself just now. Twice a week in the very beginning. You're very consistent. You just show up, right? And then I believe 6 or 8 months into it, you do Pan Ams. Am I correct on this?
I think it was 8 or 9 months in, because so I did my first tournament at 6 months. I did Pan Ams when I was a blue belt, so it must have been, I got my belt like around 9 months, so It must have been like a year and a half in or something like that.
So and you face who?
In the semifinal, I faced Kira Gracie.
Do you know who Kira is?
No.
That's probably a good thing, right?
I bring this up for two reasons. Why? First, back then, again, saturation of female and competition for female is significantly smaller than it is today. But, she's one of those big personality that really stands out and built for what jiu-jitsu for females is today, right? I mean, she really created a foundation, right? And you have the opportunity to compete against her as your first Pan Ams.
I have no idea. Like, I did my first tournament. I did a couple tournaments, and then, some people, like the women's team was like, come with us to Florida for Pans. And I'm like, Pan Ams. And I appreciate that you said Pan Ams, because that's what it was. And I have no idea. Like, it's the same. Like, I don't look that far ahead, because then it would be daunting, And, what if I said like, oh, well, we'll never do Abu Dhabi as women, Like, I was just like one step in front of the other. That's life. Opportunities come up. They're like, come with us. I'm like, okay. And I sign up and I go in and I compete against Kira. And, what was the question?
I was wondering, like, what's your feeling looking in a retrospect now? Because, I mean, competing with those individuals, not only her particularly, but all the women that you have competed, you are essentially creating a path for all the ladies who are competing today or want to compete today, right? What's your feeling on that, looking in a retrospect, decade or two backwards?
In retrospect, it's very different from the experience that it was. So,
what do you mean by that?
Well, now it's like, even just in how you phrased it, like you were building this, you were part of this, of the growth of the sport and women competing. When I was coming up, a lot of times people would say, oh, you should teach a women's class, or you should do this. And it was about women and women and women. I'm like, I just want to compete. I just want to train and compete. I'm not doing this to help other people. I'm doing this because I love this sport. Like, I want to do this sport. And all my energy was focused at that. It's like, I show up to class, I train, I go compete. And it was just such a very different environment back then. There were other women that were doing it ahead of me, alongside of me, behind me, So I didn't feel like there was no awareness of doing anything different or bigger than what it was. It was just, I'm going to go compete. Who wants to go? Like, let's go, guys, And it was all the guys, like which guys are going to come with me to the tournament and who was going to compete and who was going to help me, be in my corner.
How was your training for these things? And I'm not even talking about the Pan Ams, the first, like the early on, but I'm talking about the little bit more professional, ADCC and other things. How was your training during that time? Because still, even at that point, what is it, 2006, 7, 8, somewhere around there, right? Yeah. I mean, even then, training partners, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but finding training partners that you will be competing with, it's probably hard.
Yeah, well, you never have the perfect situation regardless. At that time, I think, having grown up as a gymnast and lifting weights when I was like 10 years old and doing interval sprints at that time, right? Like, I was pretty involved in sports. So now I'm like 38 years old, 39 years old, 37, and I'm getting ready and getting more involved in this very physically intense sport. It only makes sense to me to start, I would do conditioning. I would go and run stairs at the stadium and do all that stuff. So I was I don't know if a lot of people and if a lot of women, especially at that time, were training as athletes. And I was. And I think that definitely gave me an advantage to negate my age at that time too. And a lot of the girls were much younger than me that I was competing against, and eventually grew into being adults later and champions. But I always, like, it just made sense to me. It's like, well, if I want to have better cardio, if I want to have better strength, I need to go work out outside of training on the mat. And so I was doing that. And then I had some training partners and friends from different places that were all probably under 150 pounds. So, during the week when I would go to class, Jean-Jacques would always just, hey, go with her, take off your gi. If it was Nogi, take off your gi top, go with her. So he would always make sure I had like the smaller guys to go with. So 150, 140, 160 pounds, or guys that he knew at least would be technical and wouldn't hurt me. So I could get my rounds in there. And then like on the weekends, I would get together with other friends that were all small from other places that I knew. And we would go train. And then I would do additional conditioning. And I know like before ADCC and during that time, I was monitoring my diet, all that stuff. And I had a strength and conditioning coach that was helping me at the time. And I would do rounds with my buddies. Like I would do a round, and while they were doing, I would get a fresh guy each round. Right. Mm-hmm. And then there'd be like a minute rest, and I'd be doing burpees or kettlebell swings or something between that. And so I was just figuring out all this conditioning stuff to push myself and to push my system. And my mind, mostly my mind, in training, just figuring that out. I also had a sports psychologist that was really helpful. That made a big difference in my progression.
Do you think that physical training, as you describe it, is important for anybody, just in general? I'm not even talking about females, but just in general. Do you think that is part of the recipe to success when it comes to competition?
I think everybody's different. I think now, because of what I've gone through, and now I compete in masters, but because of my health and because of what has happened to me, I don't do that anymore. I know that there are definitely people at the highest level that I think most of them probably are very serious athletes at this time in our history of jiu-jitsu. But then you also had people like Marcelo Garcia that never, all he did was jiu-jitsu, right? So I think you have to figure out what works for you. I think at the highest level, I think you have to train as an athlete for sure.
Well, things have evolved since, you have competed on that. I'm talking about the ADCC. I mean, the sport is by far more physical. It even turns into more professional, not more. It is a professional sport. The athletes actually get paid for this, right? Yeah. So the stakes are higher. They are able to actually not have a second job. They can actually devote the funds into their professional training, hire people who can actually get them where they need to be with the goal of winning these tournaments, right?
Yes.
I've got a question. You touched on it briefly. You've had back issues, health issues, where you took a big chunk of time off. And I want to know what that process was like when you had to make that hard decision. And then after that, here you are again competing in the Masters, right? So can you walk us through that a little bit? And, you don't have to get into specifics, but just the decision-making and the process to go from, I've got to give this up, to, no, I'm going back.
Yeah, it's been quite a wild ride. So I got sick and with EBV, basically I had mono that didn't go away. And so I had a lot of fatigue issues, and I tried to condition it out of my body. I tried to do different things. So for 5 years, I didn't really train. I was teaching and not really actively training. I would roll maybe once every 6 months, probably get hurt. And like literally I lost all my flexibility. But I was still teaching full time at a gym and privates, but the body kind of shut down. And I think from the EBV, you know, I think that was from being so run down with all the competition and everything. And I think in my case, I don't regret it, and it was worth it for me. And so that for those 5 years, I kind of just struggled through that, trying different ways to fix and heal my body. And I wasn't able to find it. So I decided that I was really unhappy trying to teach and be in an environment that I couldn't fully participate in. And I couldn't participate in the way that it made me most happy, which was rolling and training. So I decided, I had a private student and we went to Hawaii, and I had decided that after I came back from that trip with her, that I was going to start a new life, because it was just so frustrating to be around all, you know, in this gym every day and still not be able to participate, learn, grow, discover things, have that freedom to be on the mat. And so I decided that I would start a new life. And unfortunately for me, that didn't work out. I went to Hawaii, and my friend told me about an algae supplement that would help. And within 2 days, I felt better. And I flew back and walked into Jean-Jacques' Academy, which I hadn't been in for a few years. And I said, I would like to come back. And I signed up for Masters Worlds a week and a half later. And I trained a few times, and I went back and competed. And it's been weird, because it's almost like, you know, I kind of I was about to sign the divorce, right? Mm-hmm. And then didn't go through with it, and came back and fell in love with Jiu Jitsu even more than I had loved it in the first place, you know? So it's been pretty crazy. And now rolling for me, this is the thing that's changed too, is, well, I mean, I've changed a lot, right? Like the struggle with the fatigue and all that stuff, like I had to change my life. And I think it happens with a lot of people, especially at a certain age, when you start having health issues, or you see people around you having health issues or passing away, having cancer, having all these things. And, you know, it's sort of like they used to call it a midlife crisis in some sense, which I really think is just a moment in time where you go, wow, like, okay, I lived half of my life and I have the next half ahead of me. And all these signs are telling me that maybe the way that I'm doing certain things isn't serving me and isn't going to help me in the next half. Like the things that I needed for that first half are different from the things I'm going to have to need and do for the second half. And how do I heed these wake-up calls to change my life to be better, that I can have this amazing second half? And I don't know that we've had the longevity in the past history that we have that now. You know, like when we were young, it was like, man, 40 was old.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then 50 was old. And then now you have Betty at 60, whatever, getting her black belt and out there competing. And I don't know, is 90 the new 30? Like it's so different. Right. And I'm 54 right now. Like, good Lord, I don't feel 54. And imagining my mom at 54, like, what was she doing versus what I'm doing? And how do we start taking care of ourselves in a different way, whether that's the stress of your life, your job, your relationships, the food you're eating, the exercise you're doing, all of these things. Your stress level, I think, is a huge part of what I had to learn. And most of it was, how do you can't change the world, and you can change how you respond, you know, like what I'm saying is nothing new. And for me to really have to learn to control the parts of my environment that I can. So that meant getting rid of situations and things that were not serving me, and trying to get out of patterns and comfortable situations, which may have been comfortable in their negative ways, right? Like repeating negative patterns because they're comfortable. Actually, I'm not saying this at all, but like it goes back to what we were talking about, like being in an abusive relationship. I'm not saying I was in one, but I'm just saying, like, how do you change all these patterns that may not be healthy, but they're comfortable, right? And that's why we keep repeating them, because they're comfortable. So how do we change those? And then we open to the possibility of more positive, better, greater things in our life. And so making those changes and how much the world opens up, right?
Yeah, I don't know what the difference is. And I think, I look at my parents' generation, and it was like when they got to a certain age, you accepted that things were supposed to be over. Like, this is you raised your kids, and now you're kind of, that seemed to be more mainstream. And now for people our age, it's like, I got a lot more living to do. I got other things I need to do. And I think that reflection that you had and that a lot of others have at this age is, I'm not going to be my parents. I'm not going to sit down. It goes back to maybe what you said in the very beginning about don't go home first. I know if I go home, none of my errands are getting run, right? I'm not going to go back out to the gym or whatever. So I don't know if it's a generational thing. I don't know where it came from. But I do see it now more than ever with people that they're like, no, I got this. The second half is where I'm going to start living.
Well, could it be because the opportunities didn't exist for the previous generations? Like, I don't envision my dad doing jiu-jitsu in his 30s, let alone his 60s. Like, I just don't. There's no way.
Yeah, but I think there's other opportunities.
Well, imagine your mom doing it.
I know, right? I know, right? I just had a visual of mom in a gi. I don't know about that one. But listen, today we have 50, 60, 70-year-olds literally coming on the mat. Our oldest students, I don't know. Hey, shout out to Zook, but I don't know. He's up there. I mean, and Steve and many others. I mean, Gary's like 95. Well, according to your counts, he's 40 only. So, I think that one, we are smarter about life in general. Two, I think we have more opportunities. Even training jiu-jitsu 20 years ago for 40-year-old was impossible.
Yeah.
I remember walking into Jiu-Jitsu Academy way back 20 years ago, and luckily I was 20-some, but like you were getting destroyed. Like, it was a fighting gym. It was fight. It was not jiu-jitsu. It was fighting. It was surviving. And if you didn't want to put up with it, you mentioned that earlier, if you didn't want to put up with it, you quit. Today, you have the opportunity of coming into family-friendly academies, exploring jiu-jitsu. It's slightly different. I think, we have these unique things presenting it. And it's not only jiu-jitsu. I mean, you can go skydiving if you want. I mean,
Well, it's anything. I think it's just don't go home. I mean,
listen, by the way,
that's the takeaway today. Don't go home.
Don't go home. I'm telling all my students.
Yeah.
Okay?
I have to text Margaret right now.
What time did you finish your work? 11. Oh, you have only 6 more hours. You can hang out in front of the academy and watch Lakers. You're fine. You're fine. I'll see you in the class.
Yeah.
all you need is your phone. Like, no one has an excuse,
Absolutely. Listen, I keep saying this every episode, but it's very true. The worst part about this show is that it has to come to the end at some point. So before we wrap this up, we start doing this year where a person sitting in your seat, previous episode, asked a question, not knowing who's going to be sitting right now. So we have a question. Gary's going to take a lead on this, but it's always creating a very, very interesting end to the episode and kind of wraps up the conversation.
Yeah. So this question actually comes from Kenny Florian, and it is, what is the most important? Yeah, Kenny's awesome, man. What is the most important thing jiu-jitsu has taught you?
Gratitude.
Nice.
Elaborate.
Yeah. Why? Why that?
Well, as I was saying earlier, like we were just talking about it, like I almost quit Jiu Jitsu. And when I came back, I realized how much joy rolling on the mat, how much joy I got out of rolling on the mat. And I love rolling. It is, it's just like the greatest experience in life, I think. And when I was training earlier and competing and coming up, I didn't get to experience that joy in the same way. And so walking away from it, almost not coming back, and then coming back to it made me appreciate it. And that every time I'm on the mat now, I have gratitude for all the people there, for everything that jiu-jitsu has given me. And every time I get to roll, and thinking like, that might be the last time I get to do that. For whatever reason, whether it, in our world, there's so many crazy things happening, or, like I already went through not having that. Right. And so to have that back in my life and to have that joy again. Yeah.
On that beautiful thought, if anybody wants to connect with you on a more personal level, are you available on social media? Where can anybody find you as a follow-up to this conversation?
He's most easily on Instagram. I have 2 accounts there, Felicia Oh and FLAU, Art of Felicia Oh. And I just want to share that, like, it's really cool that Kenny Florian asked me that, because, they call him Ken Flo. Well, my initials are FLO as well. And actually, someone once messaged me thinking I was Kenny. And it's like, because I had my name, like, it was Flo something or whatever. And then they thought I was Kenny. So that was kind of funny. Yeah. So, I'm on Facebook. I'm not on there as much. I have an account there that I check on. But yeah, just on Instagram, hit me up anytime.
Absolutely. Wonderful. And we'll make sure to include all the links, including to your organization, in the show notes of this episode. So if you guys are interested in connecting with Felicia, feel free to do that. Find her. What a brilliant stories, what a brilliant experiences that you've shared with us today. We appreciate you being here and taking the time out of your day to really share some of the wisdom, because that's literally what it is. Gary?
Yeah, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for your time. And if you are teaching seminars and you come through this way, get a hold of Thomas for sure. I think that would be amazing to pack the mats. That would be fantastic. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much for doing this.
We'll see you around.
All right. Peace. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.